Hi, welcome to Northern Lights, a look at Minnesota books and writers. I'm Bruce Southworth, a mystery book reviewer for Bookpage and Publishers Weekly. And our program today is on Bouchercon, the World Mystery Convention, which was held in St. Paul, Minnesota, October of 1996, bringing together over 1,500 fans and writers. Bouchercon itself was founded in 1969, and at the first convention there were only 100 or so attendees, so you can see how much the convention itself has grown. Our program today features highlights from Bouchercon, and in the beginning we'll be starting out with a special interview that we had with Bouchercon's guest of honor, Mary Higgins Clark. Following that will be portions of a panel called On Tape, On Disc, Online, discussing alternative forms of publishing mysteries. Following that will be a portion of the discussion between local writers Ron Handberg and John Sandford, and following that, a bottomless battered tin dispatch box, a look at Sherlockian pastiches. Bouchercon was an exciting event for me personally, not only as an attendee, but as the co-chair of the event as well. And it was well received by mystery fans and writers from around the world. I hope you'll enjoy this look at Bouchercon 1996. We're here at Bouchercon 27 in downtown St. Paul, October 1996. I'm Bruce Southworth, a mystery book reviewer and co-chair for Bouchercon 27, and with me is
Joanne Myers. I was the hotel liaison person, and I've been a friend of Mary's for a number of years.
And our very special guest at the moment, Mary Higgins Clark, who is the guest of honor for Bouchercon 27. Welcome. Welcome to the Twin Cities, or back to the Twin Cities.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Bruce.
I was wondering if you could describe your reaction at being selected for the guest of honor for Bouchercon.
Well, I was absolutely delighted because it's an honor. I mean, look, there are 1,500 people here today. Mm-hmm. And I was at the Bouchercon 22 years ago when I think we had about 2 tables of us. That was the Bouchercon. Mm-hmm. So really, it's a great honor. And of course, I'm a member of Malice Domestic, and every year we have the Ghost of Honor. Mm-hmm. Like Agatha Christie and Josephine Tay, so I'm happy to say I'd rather be the guest of honor than the ghost of honor.
Perhaps in another 40 or 50 years or beyond, you can be the ghost of honor. I wanted to ask you, the new book that you have out, My Gal Sunday, is a departure, a new set of characters. What set you on deciding to go off on a new series?
Well, Otto Penzler asked me to do a short story for an anthology, Murder for Love. And the thing about anthologies as a short story is that I experiment, I play games. Mm-hmm. And I had had this kicking around in my head for a while, so I wrote a novella, really. It wasn't a short story. And I had always had a crush on a character in a radio play years ago. It was called Our Gal Sunday. And when I would be home with asthma from school, I would listen. And it was, the line for it was, the story that asked the question, can a little girl from a mining town in the West find happiness as the wife of England's richest, most handsome lord, Lord Henry Brinthorpe? And I was wildly in love with Henry Brinthorpe. I could see him riding to hounds, you know. Mm-hmm. I could see him having an after-dinner drink in the study. So this was sort of a tongue-in-cheek. I have Henry Parker Britton IV, mm-hmm. who was elected president of the United States at age 35 and 39. So at 44, he's an ex-president, one of the most popular of this century. Mm-hmm. And he falls in love with a 32-year-old congresswoman from the wrong side of the tracks in Jersey City. They are married within 6 weeks of meeting each other, his last night in the White House. Mm-hmm. And now they're solving crimes. And when Simon and Schuster read that one story, because they had said, hey, we heard you wrote for someone else. And I said, well, actually, you do know I can write short pieces. And they said, well, of course, of course, of course. They said, let's see it. And then they said, Mary, we want you to do a collection on Henry and Sunday. So that's a long answer to tell you why My Gal Sunday.
Marvelous. How did the crimes come to their attention? I would think that an ex-president and a congresswoman would be in a sort of a rarefied atmosphere.
Well, you know, that's one of the hard things. They're not going to bump into them in the subway, right? Mm-hmm. So you get that. That was one of the problems. But the first one, for example, is called A Crime of Passion. And Henry is reading, and he says, definitely a crime of passion. His 65-year-old ex-Secretary of State has been accused of murdering his girlfriend, Arabella Young. And Henry and Sunday go because they want to help Tommy whatever way they can.
I see.
They all ran after the president's wife. Sunday is kidnapped. And Henry is trying to get his bride back. And you see, that's something else that's tough, because an ex-president's wife has Secret Servicemen with her and a follow-up car. So you've got to know, I have a Secret Serviceman, an ex-Secret Serviceman, who has a security firm in Washington, and he was my advisor on it. And I checked out, he said, well, there'd be a follow-up car, the main Secret Serviceman, the head guy is the driver, is sitting next to the driver. There would be two in the back. And I said, well, if. So he was very helpful. And how many would Henry have, the former president? He said, well, he'd have 25 on staff, you know, allowing for 3 shifts. And
Goodness.
so it was that. And then there were 2 other stories that I think are fun in it as well.
Is that typical of the detail of research that you go into, or do you usually delve a lot more into particular subjects, locales, and...
You've got to be right. I mean, readers are very, very, very smart. And I don't think anybody should ever take for granted that the reader is going to just say, oh, that's okay. You know, if you're going from Minneapolis to St. Paul and it takes you 4 hours, it loses all believability. And then the people say, oh, for heaven's sake. I always compare that kind of thing to going into a model home and, oh, it doesn't look cute, isn't it pretty? And then you realize the floor is uneven under the carpet and the wall doesn't meet the ceiling, and you know it's not well constructed. And a book is like that. Sure, you make mistakes, but the mistakes are always the ones where I think I know something. That's the worst thing that can happen to anyone, is to assume you know it, and what you know is erroneous.
And you will certainly be have writers pointing that out. I'm sure you have correspondence, you know, volumes of correspondence.
People absolutely write to me, and often very affectionately, but they say, I just want you to know, I'm a scuba diver, and you should have mentioned that there are bubbles, because there'd be bubbles coming up, you see? And a teacher I had when I was 14 years old wrote, Dear Miss Higgins, it is very clear that Mother St. Margaret of the Angels did not succeed in telling you the difference between to lay and to lie. And she laid the whole thing out for me.
Or did she lie the whole thing out? I always have trouble with that one myself. Be a good exposition. One thing we were talking about before we got started with this was we were kind of curious how you work on a daily basis. Do you write at a certain time, write so many pages, do revisions first, or...?
No, you have to know the storyline. You must know what your storyline is, what it's about. Well, I'll give you an example. The book that I'm writing now is called Pretend You Don't See Her. And I'm going to have a New York woman who is in the Federal Witness Protection Plan. And since I like this Twin Cities so much, I'm going to have her here and fall in love with a journalist and realize that she must go back and face and be relieved from this death threat, because she knows something more than is coming out, than she realizes herself. And suppose you fell in love with a young woman out here, and she's telling you lies about herself, and she thinks, I can't do this, I can't live like this, but she's not going to involve you. So she disappears. And when you go to trace her, everything she told you was a lie.
That would be...
And then she is in New York, and I'm having fun with that book. It's called Pretend You Don't See Her. You know the old Jerry Vale song? Pretend You Don't See Her, My Heart.
Yeah, wonderful song. I guess what I was kind of alluding to is just your regular work habit, work day type of thing. Do you write on a routine?
Oh, you've got to. You know, some people think writers write when the spirit moves. There'd never be anything written if that happened. I get up, I make coffee, I listen to the traffic reports, because I commuted into New York from New Jersey for 13 years, and I listen that Route 4 is a parking lot, avoid the George Washington Bridge. accident on West Side Highway, 20-minute delay. And I say, thank you, Lord, I am not getting arrogant. I am very, very grateful. And I make coffee, and I schlep upstairs in my old bathrobe, and I read the last 6 pages of the current manuscript, and to warm myself up, I say, okay, kids, what kind of trouble can we get in today? And then I work. The ideal is to work until about 1 or 2. Of course, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I will take things to speak at a luncheon. You know, I do a lot of charity kind of affairs. And of course, there are some business meetings. And then you've absolutely got to talk on the phone. This is very important. My secretary comes up. So, and then the deadline is looming. And heavy rests the head that wears the computer. Because you're thinking, my God. And then my editor phones, Mary, how's it going? Will we be getting copy today? I think, oh, God. So I work, though. I work every day. I'm really trying not to work on weekends, but I even do some of that.
Yeah, I would imagine that as deadlines loom, as you say, every moment that you can to try and wrap something up would be critical.
Or be thinking about it, or be saying, why didn't it work? I mean, and then you see, I do a publicity trip for the current book, and while I'm out, I have the ThinkPad with me, and if that goes down, I just go longhand.
I know several authors that I've talked to have foregone computers. They stick to longhand and then have someone, translate it, key it into the computer.
Yeah.
Nobody could ever read my writing. I think that's amazing.
Well, I had to fax. I was away this summer, and my computer went down, my ThinkPad, so I had to write and fax for my editor's long-suffering assistant to type, and the Palmer diploma method and I were never good friends.
I was just going to ask Mary, where did you get the idea of coming up with the old songs as the titles in this last few books?
Well, you see, Loves Music, Loves to Dance was the first one, and that was and that's not really the title of a song, but it suggests it, because I was listening to an FBI agent, and he had bulletins, posters, 7 lovely young girls, all of whom had been murdered. The guy had individually over 3 years, and the common denominator was that they had all answered his personal ad. And he had finished the lecture by saying, yes, nice people may meet nice people. These personal ads are also a mecca for the losers, the loners, the psychopaths, and the serial killers. So be careful. And it just walked through my head, loves music, loves to dance. And the book was very, very successful. So since then, I just thought there's a melody in titles, and it's the dark side of the title. You see, with Pretend You Don't See Her, he knows he's being stonewalled by the authorities. He's saying that she disappeared, and they're saying, oh, yeah.
You're right. You're right. One thing that we wanted to ask you as well is how it feels to be the mother of a very successful mystery writer, your daughter Carol.
Absolutely marvelous. Simply wonderful. It's such fun to see Carol in the same path, and I had nothing to do with it. Warners asked her, because they heard her talking about how she would read my manuscripts and say, you can't say this and you can't and whatever, and she was absolutely right. And they asked her to do a book, and she called me and she said, what do you think? And I said, well, go for it, baby. And I knew that when you're the daughter of someone in the field, yes, the door is open. B, mental image of the door jamb on your fingers if you can cut the mustard. So like everything else, it's positive, negative. I am thoroughly delighted. I am thoroughly delighted and pleased. I used to say that she was my sole hope of being supported in my declining years. But I'm getting married, so somebody else will support me.
Somebody else will support you for the while, anyway.
Mary, I remember meeting you for the very first time in Minnesota at a pretty lousy ski resort up in Ely where we all slept in sleeping bags on the floor. Was that your first impression of Minnesota?
Oh, Joanne, I thought it was a load of fun, because it was cold and it was winter, and I was doing some cross-country skiing, and there was a dog race, dog sled race. I thought it was a load of fun. I really did. And you and I became buddies that
right.
visit that time, and it certainly was great.
You had to be buddies because we all slept next to each other on the floor in
Oh,
the
sure, it was
sleeping
kind of
bags.
fun, and there was a big fire roaring, and I thought it was great. Minnesota's a lovely, lovely state. Minneapolis is a city, and it's always a pleasure to come back to the Twin Cities, very much so. And I'm so glad that this program is for authors. Thank you all very much.
Well,
Okay, well, we'd very much like to thank you for taking some time out to chat with us today. And we know you have to head off to another interview, one by your daughter, for that matter, so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Bruce
Thank
and
you.
Joanne.
Thank you for coming, Mary. I'd love to see you.
Our website, The Case, which was launched in January, has been featured on such programs as the Good Morning America show. They featured it as one of the 4 best websites out there. And when we got that exposure, we found it quite interesting because it brought a lot of people to the website who, A, were not necessarily mainstream mystery fans, and B, who were not big internet advocates. So it brought us a good base, and it's helped us expand the audience. We get email from people every day that say they play the case, they read the case instead of watching TV. And we find that really fascinating because what they're doing now is they're reading, but they don't have to read a book. Let me tell you real quick about the case, and I'd really rather, when we get into the questions, I'll answer questions about it, but I'd really would be interested more in hearing the questions people have about, well, can we do such and such online? Or this is what I'd love to see online. Let's do that. And that has to do with the other media as well, because it's not just about taking a book and putting it on the internet so that someone can read it online. That's not what online's all about. What we did with the case when we launched in January is we had one mystery, and it's a solve-it-yourself mystery. On Tuesday, if you sign up at our website and it's free, we'll email you a mystery, and the mystery is 700 to 900 words. And I come to a conference like this, and a lot of people say 700 to 900 words. I can't even introduce my new characters in 700 to 900 words. The reality is that the mystery has a beginning, a middle, and an end, 2 to 4 suspects, and it's hopefully, if we've done our job right, it's solvable. So we email that to the readers so they can print it out, they can do it, read it anytime they want, they can get together in a group. We have van pools that read it together, and they try to solve it on the way to work. Then we also, at the same time, post additional clues at the website. And those additional clues can help you solve the mystery even further. If you think you know who done it, you can email us your answer, and we ask 3 questions. Usually it's kind of like who's, whys, and hows. You email that answer to us, and we tally the results. On the following Thursday, so it starts on Tuesday, and Thursday we post the solution. The following Tuesday, when the next mystery goes up, we put up the results and the winners from the previous. Now, this is not a race. We get a lot of people on the internet who think it should be a race. I want to be the first one to solve it. But we don't think that that's really what a true mystery is about, in terms of the puzzle side of the mystery anyway. So it's really more of a contest in that we take all of the people who get the answer right, and then we pick a winner. And the winner wins either a T-shirt or one of our sponsors' prizes.
I hope that I can say, I will see lots of hands if I ask you if any of you have ever listened to a mystery on tape. Great. Then I don't have to start with my blind grandmother. Because the audiobook industry is already tremendous. In this current year, there'll be over $1 billion in sales of audiobooks. And I don't have the statistics on how many of those audiobooks are mysteries, but because I get into our office for review probably between 100 and almost, some months, almost 200 audiobooks, I would say that half of those are mysteries.
I'd just like to talk a little bit about my experiences and what I feel about books on tape. And I guess the first thing I want to say is that I contend that they're not really new at all. We forget that novels are in fact fairly recent inventions. I guess if I look back to my literary history, probably the 17th, 18th century, but storytelling has been around for generations, for years and years, thousands of years. The difference being that the stories were not read, but were listened to. The oral tradition of the epics, of course, goes back 2,000, 3,000 BC, perhaps earlier than that. The ancient Greeks, the Chinese, the Celts loved their war stories, their love stories, and their mysteries just as much as we do. And I don't doubt that the Roman legions would have marched up into Gaul listening to Virgil on audio tape if, in fact, Sony Corporation and AA batteries had been around back then.
I don't have an outline. I begin with the basic notion of the plot and then simply let the story develop. Almost as a reader reads, I try to write. What I found about this, at least in terms of my writing, I think if I had an outline, at least a very strong one, it would close my mind to other possibilities. And what I found, at least in these first 3 books, is that some of the best characters and some of the best twists and development have come out of necessity because of where I was in the book. That there had to be a logical next step, and how could I do that and yet maintain the suspense? And so I have really, in fact, in all 3 of the books, I've not known what my ending would be until I was 3/4 of the way done. And I know that flies in the face of a lot of rules and a lot of the way a lot of people write, but that's what's worked for me. John, how do you?
I usually need to start with a situation, and I'll have to think that up as I go along. And usually, I'll think it up to a year or so before I start the book, so I'll know like what the next Davenport book is going to start with about now. I'll start thinking about that. I'm halfway through another book, but I will sort of have a feeling of what that situation is going to be, and then I can build on that. And then when I get, the hardest part of the book is from about, if you're writing books, say, just you pick a number out, say like 100,000 words long, the hardest part's going to be from about 30 to 70,000, because then there comes a time when you get toward the end of the book where you kind of launch into an ending sequence, and you can figure out that sequence. At that point, I'll put together usually an outline, but the outline will be just about like this. It'll be maybe about this, and this will be, say, 10 chapters. And I know, it'll be a 1 page or a page and a half in yellow pages, got little boxes and squares, and usually I'll go to a country kitchen restaurant and have pancakes or something to work out the whole end of the book. Just because, that's comfortable for me, and it sort of keeps me on track, and that's how I think you can write kind of a bang-up ending. You don't get distracted by other things. But basically, I know what you mean. You sort of grow a book sometimes. You're right in the middle of it, and you get a lot of kind of unexpected little offshoots.
What so often irritated me as a reader was to read books that were unbelievable or depended so heavily on coincidences that you kind of put it down and said that never could have happened, or the chances of that happening were 1 in a million. So I've tried really hard to make what happens in my books believable, that they could actually happen, that people could actually do this. Now you take some liberties, obviously, but it's been real important for me to try to do that, because it was the most irritating thing to me as a reader of this genre.
Well, I don't know. Well, one of the things I tend to go around sometimes and talk about journalism, and last week when I was speaking to the medical examiners over, I mentioned there's a thing that I call from newsroom is a thing called situational ignorance, in which you have say a newspaper reporter who's very bright and who's very bright and everything, but he's thrust into a situation which he simply doesn't know what's going on, and he has to write a news story about it. So he sort of believes the first person he comes to who will talk a good line to him. And sometimes when you're moving a little too fast as a fiction writer, you do the same thing. You sort of do a little bit of research about something, or you remember something, And when I was talking about this last week, some of the medical examiners were telling me that you have a little bit of a problem with specific details in a book. For example, if you set a crime scene and somebody's doing something really strange at the crime scene, and they just won't allow you to do that. I mean, they don't allow reporters to go around and kick around the bodies and lift up sheets to see who's under them. They just don't do that. So when I read a book that involves a newsroom, it really bothers me when things aren't done right.
The point of this topic, the bottomless battered tin dispatch box, is to look at what is the appeal of using the Sherlock Holmes Dr. Watson model. Why do so many authors who are either starting out, writing a first-time novel, choose to write a Sherlockian pastiche, or why do so many authors who have been established, who've written for a long time, decide to go back to that particular form?
As far as the popularity, I think these stories are told in a very vivid, driving way, and children read them at a early age. I know I did. And what you read as a child stays with you. Those are those Bradbury enthusiasms. So, and they also cover 40 years, roughly, in Holmes's life, and cover a lot of change, a period of very interesting time. The late 90s were the fountainhead of what are the roots of today's popular fiction, the first political thriller, the first vampire novel, the Lost World. Doyle himself wrote Lost World, which Jurassic Park is continuing the tradition.
But after the 7% Solution and its sequels became so successful and actually were on the bestseller list, I think that encouraged a great many publishers and authors to write in this genre.
When I started this book, I actually did not start it as a Sherlock Holmes novel. I started from the situation of the Hinckley Fire, which I felt was a very dramatic event that could be novelized, and I started considering different ideas for a detective, and then sort of by serendipity I realized as I was doing some reading that the timing of the fire was such, and the timing of Sherlock's various activities was such that I could insert him and Watson into this adventure and do so in a canonically, is that a word? Correct fashion, just by sheer happenstance. And so that actually, I started with the idea of the story first, and then the more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that maybe Holmes would be the right guy to do this for a variety of reasons.
So based on this year's crop, we want to keep the Sherlock Holmes pastiches coming.
I also sort of subscribe to the Holy Mountain theory of Conan Doyle. I mean, I think a lot of writers see the canon as kind of a holy mountain, a place where you go to pilgrimage to, and you want to kind of match yourself up against it and see what you can do with it in a variety of ways. And we talk about the pastiches, and there's a huge continuum from the wildest burlesque on one hand all the way to extremely faithful accounts on the other, and so you kind of decide where you want to put yourself in that continuum and then fly with it. But mostly I did it because I just thought it would be great fun. I mean, honestly, that's kind of the bottom line. I just thought it would be fun to bring Sherlock to Minnesota. And as I mentioned to people, my study where I live in St. Paul overlooks Baker Street.
Northern Lights is presented to encourage your appreciation and support of Minnesota books and writers. Thank you for joining us. Please tune in again.